I have lived for nearly 30 years and have never been popular with women, but for some reason, kids seem to like me. Babies and strollers passing by on the street, toddlers being led by their parents. They all look at my face with such curiosity and never take their eyes off me. Some even cheerfully stretch out their arms as if wanting to be picked up. Once while I was crouching on the sidewalk tying my loose shoelaces, an unfamiliar little boy approached and offered me a balloon. I went through college without much of a plan, and when it was time to start job hunting, I realized I didn't have a particular career passion. The only thing going for me was that kids seemed to like me. That being said, I wasn't especially fond of children. But somehow, although I wasn't sure if it was a special skill, I thought of becoming a child care worker. After working at a daycare as an assistant for 3 years, I got my child care certification. When I moved to another daycare, I realized something about myself. I'm not a morning person. It's exhausting to deal with hyperactive kids in the morning, so I looked for a daycare that had afternoon shifts. I found one 6 months ago that offered evening care. It's a great place to work. My hours are from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Good evening, I'm Mary. Dressed in my uniform, an apron with a bear on it, I cheerfully greeted her at the entrance. Good evening, Catherine's mom. After glancing at me, she gave a cold and emotionless stare. Darn it, I slipped up. She didn't like being referred to as Catherine's mom. Catherine is her 4-year-old daughter who is under our care 3 times a week. She came to pick up little Catherine after work. People often assume that parents who use night care work in nightlife professions, but in reality, they have various jobs like office workers, teachers, and entrepreneurs. She is a doctor, a physician working 3 times a week at a nearby clinic in our neighborhood. I heard she divorced a few years back and is now a single mother. Good evening, Mary. I quickly corrected my greeting and went to wake up sleeping Catherine. Man, that was nerve-wracking. I almost had a heart attack there. To be honest, I had a crush on Catherine's mom. Mary. I liked her pale skin, natural makeup, and her slightly stern and serene appearance. There is no reason you like what you like. I began to look forward to those brief moments when we exchanged a few words or when I updated her about Catherine's day. After all, in my eyes, it was just a fleeting crush from a plain man nearing his 30s who's never been popular with women. Whether it was the ice cream I had late at night, or maybe I caught a chill, I ended up with an upset stomach that day. I've always had a weak stomach. Thinking it was just the usual, I decided to get checked out at the nearby clinic. While filling out the form at the reception, I realized something huge. Today was the day to take care of little Catherine, which means she works at this clinic. Man, how clueless am I getting treated by her. Do I tell her about my upset stomach? Sweat poured down my forehead in a panic. I glanced at the staff schedule posted on the waiting room wall. Sure enough, among the 3 doctors listed, there was the name Mary. My chances of being treated by her were 33.3%. I'm no baseball expert, but isn't a 300 hitter pretty good? Does that mean it's hard to achieve? Does that mean my chances of seeing her are also pretty slim? What am I thinking? It's just a 1 in 3 chance, duh. Trying to calm my racing heart, I took a deep breath. John, I was called into the examination room, and of course, she was the one waiting for me. I immediately recognized her, but something felt different. The first thing I noticed was the thin silver glasses she wore, which she doesn't wear when picking up Catherine in the evening. Her usually subtle makeup was almost non-existent in the white coat she wore. Well, it was light pink, really, but it suited her well. How are you? I said with a polite smile, trying to make a good impression. However, she didn't react at all. She simply checked the form I'd filled out, asked a few routine questions while glancing at her computer, and performed the usual checks. Throughout, she was all business. According to her, my stomach troubles were likely a one-off thing. She ordered a blood test just to be sure and prescribed some medication. I arrived at the daycare 2 hours late. Catherine suddenly hugged me as soon as I walked in. What's up, Catherine? While I was comforting her, a female co-worker told me that Catherine had been fussy the whole time I was absent. While I was away, little Catherine was quite fussy. She must really like me, I guess. Good evening, this is Mary. That night, As I greeted her at the daycare's entrance to hand over Catherine, she asked, "Good evening, I'll bring Catherine over now." That's what I replied. She then asked, "How are you feeling?" By the next day, my stomach issues were completely resolved, but ever since that day, I haven't felt great. I don't have a fever and my appetite is okay. How are you feeling? Just thinking about her words made my stomach churn and gave me palpitations for days. That day, as always, after playing with the kids, I was preparing snacks. Then Catherine, looking grumpy, clung to me. "What's wrong?" "Catherine, when I asked," she responded, "I don't like that person. I really don't," over and over. "Good evening, I'm Mary." That night, when she came to pick up Catherine, I reported the matter to her. "I'm not sure who she's talking about, but Catherine seemed quite troubled," I said hesitantly. Mary's face darkened as she responded, "I said so. I had no high idea." About 10 days later, just past 7 p.m., the phone in my office rang. It wasn't the day to look after Catherine. I had just finished putting the kids to bed after dinner and was taking a breather. I happened to pick up the phone. I kept saying, "Hello," but there was just silence on the other end. "What's this? A prank call?" Annoyed, I hung up, but the phone immediately rang again. "Who is this?" "What do you want?" I boldly asked. A familiar voice replied, "Are you John?" I recognized it as Catherine's right away. "What's wrong?" "What happened?" I asked. Through her tears, Catherine responded, "Mommy. Mommy needs help. It's all because of me." I sensed something very wrong was happening. "Where are you?" "At home." Once I confirmed she was home, I said, "I'm on my way," checked the address on our registration forms, and dashed out. Catherine's place was just 2 subway stops away. I figured taking the subway would be faster than hailing a cab. I ran to the nearest station and jumped onto a train. It was still during the evening rush hour, and the train was packed. 2 high school girls nearby giggled as they looked at me. I followed their gaze to see I was still wearing my bear-themed apron. I took it off, clutching it under my arm, and used the scribbled address to find Catherine's apartment building. Luckily, another resident was just entering, allowing me to bypass the security door. I repeatedly rang the doorbell and called out to Catherine. The door opened, and Catherine clung to me. I entered the apartment. "Mary, it's me, John from the daycare. Are you okay?" As I called out and moved further into the hallway, I heard her faint voice. "Over here. I can't open the door. Please help." Looking in the direction of her voice, I saw a tall metal shelf had fallen at a 45-degree angle, jamming the bathroom door shut. "It's all right. Right now." I tried to lift the fallen shelf. However, it was firmly stuck and wouldn't budge. I put my back into it, trying to move the shelf with grunts of effort. "Please help me out." I heard her desperate plea. With my back hurting, I changed my stance and pushed with all my might. Just a little more. Almost. With a jerk, the tip of the shelf came free from the bathroom door. The shelf, being made of steel, was light and was easily propped against the wall. Suddenly, the bathroom door swung open with force, striking me hard in the back. Ouch. I couldn't help but yell out, rubbing my back. "I'm so sorry," she said, looking genuinely remorseful. "When I called the daycare, they told me I could head straight home for the day." "Catherine, it's bedtime," she said to Catherine, who was clinging to me. As we sat in the living room drinking coffee, when I offered to help put her to bed, she opened the bedroom door. On the double bed there was a child's pillow, and next to it, an adult-sized one. My heart raced, thumping loudly. I thought I might even get a nosebleed. After putting Catherine to bed and returning to the living room, she explained the situation. She works 3 days a week at a clinic near the daycare, and also at another hospital where she has been working for a long time. The head of that hospital was her mentor. Recently, the hospital director had proposed a match for her. The suitor was a distant relative of the director. They had already been on several dinner dates. It felt like a bell tolling loudly in my head. He's not a bad guy, but I'm just not sure if I want to date him. She had 2 reasons for her hesitation. One was Catherine. When she introduced Catherine to the guy, Catherine took an instant dislike to him. It finally clicked for me. I realized that when Catherine previously said, I don't like that man. I hate him. She was talking about him. They had plans to meet him again on her next day off. But that night when she told Catherine about it, she became moody. That's when she went to the bathroom, and a sulking Catherine, in a fit of temper, knocked over the steel shelf. The shelf was brand new and empty, so even Catherine could easily topple it. But how did you manage to call for help in that situation? As I was impressed, she mentioned she had set it up beforehand for an instant connection. I thought of calling the daycare on the spot and had Catherine call them, she said, then added sincerely, "Thank you," expressing her gratitude to me. After leaving her place and walking along the road in front of the apartment complex, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. What was that second reason she mentioned she was troubled about? About a month later, little Catherine was leaving the daycare. When I asked the principal why, he said it was due to her mother's work commitments. Then, on Catherine's last day, she said, "It's Mom's birthday soon. This is a gift," and drew a picture of her mother's face. When I tried to take a peek at the drawing, Catherine covered it with her body. "What's wrong, Catherine? Let me see." Despite my coaxing, she kept refusing to show it. However, I could tell there was a tiny figure drawn next to the mother's face in the picture. That evening, the time had finally come to say goodbye to both Mary and Catherine. I plucked up the courage to ask Mary, "Is it about the job at that local clinic?" "I've decided to quit," she replied. Her voice sounded distant, and she seemed a bit irritated. She further explained in a matter-of-fact tone that she would now be working full-time at another hospital she had been affiliated with, which has a daycare facility. Catherine would be taking care of their full-time. So she's decided to go ahead with that matchmaking. Walking out to the daycare's gate to see them off, Catherine kept looking back and waving at me, but Mary never once looked back, seeming quite indifferent. I felt a lump in my throat. A few days later, a call for me came through at the daycare's office. It was Mary. She wanted me to come to her place next Thursday at 6 in the evening. I told her I had work and couldn't make it at that time. "Please make it work. I'll be waiting," she said, and hung up before I could respond. I was puzzled. Why would she want to see me? I had no clue whatsoever. I managed to convince the principal to give me the day off. All day, I was restless and couldn't even eat. I left my home a little past 4 p.m. The nearest station to her apartment was less than 30 minutes away, so I arrived over an hour earlier than the scheduled time. I went up to her apartment building a few times, then headed back to the train station. I wandered around the shopping district and returned to her apartment building again. After doing that a couple of times, I finally rang the doorbell at her building's entrance at 6:05. "We've been waiting for you. Come on in," she said. Despite having invited me over, her voice lacked warmth or friendliness when she greeted me at the entrance. Her face was tense with anxiety. Urged by her, I stepped inside the apartment. Suddenly, Catherine came running from the back. "Long time no see, John," and she clung to my leg. Once led to the dining area, the table was laid out with a lavish spread: salad, fried chicken, French fries, pizza, and a whole birthday cake. Taken aback by the unexpected setup, I looked at her. "Today is my birthday. Remember, my 31st. "That's why," I thought to myself. She could have just mentioned it right from the start. "Catherine insisted on inviting you." Oh, wasn't Catherine drawing a birthday present for her mom the other day? Catherine then playfully slapped me, saying I shouldn't have mentioned it. The drawing was meant to be a surprise. "You knew about today, didn't you?" Well, I knew it was coming up but didn't know the exact date. Upon hearing this, her eyes widened and her face quickly turned red. "Oh my, how embarrassing," she exclaimed, covering her face with both hands. Just then, Catherine brought over the drawing she had made as a present. Both she and I exchanged knowing glances upon seeing the drawing. After that, the three of us sat down and enjoyed her birthday dinner. During dinner, she opened up about something personal, something I have never heard before and probably wouldn't hear again. She mistakenly believed that even after Catherine told me it was her birthday, I ignored it. She didn't like being referred to as Catherine's mom by me because she felt I saw her just as a daycare mom and nothing else. When she picked up Catherine from daycare, She always made an effort to put on makeup and contact lenses because she was conscious of me. She was absent on Catherine's last day at the daycare because the thought of not seeing me again was too painful for her. Basically, she had always had feelings for me. What about that matchmaking? I turned it down. She explained that her going full-time at the clinic run by the doctor who proposed the matchmaking was purely coincidental. She also said that he wasn't the type to mix personal with professional matters. That was me jumping to conclusions. Besides, the head doctor said, if that's the case, there's nothing he can do. What do you mean, if that's the case? The main reason she hesitated about the matchmaking was Catherine, but there was another reason I hadn't heard. That's because I have someone I'm interested in now. With that said, she unfolded the birthday present drawing that Catherine made. It was a portrait of her drawn by Catherine. What caught her eye, and she pointed out, was a tiny figure next to it, a man in an apron with a teddy bear emblem on the chest. And with that, my faint admiration became a reality. After dating her for a while, I casually remarked, but a doctor and just a preschool teacher like me. She instantly flared up in anger, raising her voice. What do you mean, just? I hate when you belittle yourself like that. I really hate it. Time flew by, and now Catherine, who will be entering elementary school next year, calls me Dad. How did you find today's story? Please hit like and subscribe to the channel, and it will be a great motivation for us to continue our work. We're looking forward to reading your comments. See you in the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.